limited degree beams is that way. We do it every year, yes, but it's not outside the norm of what we do, but it is something that we emphasize once a year. We could add into that perhaps things more. I use the term no fiduciary obligation shall be created by any designated contribution made to the church other than to use the contribution for the general furtherance of the purposes as stated in Article 1 and 2. That, again, that's our purpose as a church. In other words, if somebody gave us a lot of money and said that I want you to give this to the next mayor of Ennis, we can't do that. We can't do that. It has to be ministry. Does that make sense? It has to be ministry. Arbitration. My son-in-law went through this. They had a church split. They had a young man that took about 25% of the church and started another church in the same community, and then hired an arbitrator to basically remove my son-in-law from his pastorate and take over the building and everything. They hired the arbitrator come in, he met with this young man, and he met with my son-in-law, and he went back and talked to the people. And there are organizations that do this. This is what they do. Many of them have legal backgrounds, if not lawyers. But he came to Garris and he said, I'll be very upfront with you. He says, this man wants your building. He wants you out of the way. He said, show me your constitution and bylaws. And show me, he's claiming, and he said that several things that Garris was doing was not what he called right. Can't remember the word used, but anyway, Garris took every one of them and he said, right here is what it says in our bylaws. Right here is what it says that. Right here is where it says that. And then that's what I'm doing, is I'm following our Constitution and bylaws. And he won. He won the case. And they had a negotiated settlement, if you will, in the sense that they agreed. Garris said, okay, we'll go to court. We'll go to court. Arbitrator advised them not to do that because the Garris would probably win. So they backed off. So in other words, if a church member wants to sue someone, the court will not recognize them as representing the church if they're not following their constitution and bylaws.
Yeah, that's right.
Notice of arbitration. We have, in the event of any dispute, claim, question, disagreement arising out of any of or related to these by the bylaws or any other church matter, we again, when we said there's a way to handle this biblically, we have to be able to prove we tried to do it biblically first before we bring an arbitrator in. Section 3, limitations. Should any dispute involve matters of church discipline, the arbitrator shall be limited to determining whether the procedures for church discipline as outlined under Article 3, Section 4 were followed. In other words, we built a fence around ourselves. Said, can't do this unless we follow we got to follow our own rules. Should any dispute involve the removal from office of senior pastor / co-pastor or other church officer, the arbitrator shall be limited to determining whether the procedures set forth in Article 3 were followed. Arbitration. Procedures. Procedures for arbitration shall be as adopted by the senior pastor / co-pastor, board of deacons. What will happen is, like I say, there's organizations out there, Christian organizations, they do this. Call them up and say, we need an arbitrator. They come in, they look at your constitution and bylaws, and they sit down and say, here's what you can do. Here's how we can help you. And here are the steps you need to take. Last, amendments. As we discussed in the preamble, select instruments of this constitution and bylaws may be revised by majority vote, and others may not. I mentioned several times that we were gonna add scripture to the statement of faith as we go along. By adding scripture to the statement of faith, we don't necessarily have to make an amendment because the section, everything's gonna be there. We're just adding references, adding scripture. Now, when we, in some of those bylaws that we do change, we can do it one of two ways. One way is we can make an amendment, leave everything in place, and amendments usually is when we found an exception that we might want to add. Or we can make a note within the particular section that we've added to it or changed it, modified it, whatever. But this my point is this only applies to that portion of our bylaws, not our Constitution, that we can change. And so, we've already adopted this. There in the file in the church is a signed copy of everybody that was involved when we adopted this. And as I said, we're updating it, not updating, but we'll review it constantly. And at least once a year, we'll make a determination as to whether or not we need to add to it. And a lot of it's going to be driven by, whatever laws are. I do believe that we'll probably be having an amendment here in the near future, adding, for lack of a better term, we'll think of something a little bit more, I don't know, scriptural, a bathroom bill.
Yeah.
We've got to be more precise, I think, there. Anyway, every time my mind starts clicking on that, I get irritated. Yes, ma'am.
Would we want to maybe look at something in reference to Sunday school teachers or officers, like those who have a different established sex preference, or
Yeah, that would all,
would that be something?
would have to, and that's probably why I mentioned it would have to be an amendment, would have to go back to what we already write for the qualifications of Sunday school teachers and so forth, and the amendment would have to have words of effect to refer back to it. This applies to all of the staff, really.
Yeah.
Applies to all the staff, applies to anybody that might do any ministry here in the church. Yeah, we would have to do something like that. Any other questions? Got your hand up, Addie? No? Did you understand everything?
Somewhat.
Sort of? That's better. Okay. You want to close us out, brother? Yes?
Well, if that word further, we'll be dismissed. That means I vote for next Wednesday night?
Yep.
All right. Father God, as we come in your presence, we just want to give or tell you, we love you, thank you for the opportunity.